Tomorrow, the Supreme Court will hear arguments in the case to remove Donald Trump from Colorado's Republican primary ballot. Colorado's Supreme Court decided the former president is ineligible to appear under the insurrection clause of the 14th Amendment. Trump's team says only Congress can rule on that part of the Constitution.
And this morning, our 9 News legal analyst Whitney Traylor is here to break down the impact of this appeal. Whitney, good morning to you.
Good morning.
A lot to sift through this. Tell us a little bit more about how we got here. How did this case end up at the Supreme Court?
Yeah, there's a lot to sift through, but this is an important case. This is a monumentous, occasion. And so what happened was the case originated here in Colorado when they were trying to keep him off the ballot. And the district court judge said that yes, this was an insurrection, that he engaged in insurrection, but she said that Section 3 of the 14th Amendment didn't apply to the president. The president wasn't, quote, an officer as that section laid out. So then it went to the Colorado Supreme Court, and in a split decision, 4-3, the Colorado Supreme Court said, no, this was an insurrection, and yes, you're an officer. And so now we're here at the Supreme Court, and now the U.S. Supreme Court is going to decide it. And it's fundamentally important because so many states are looking at the same issue. So the Supreme Court resolving the issue will resolve it across the nation. So this is an important ruling.
Colorado actually received international attention when it came to this ruling. Why do you think the plaintiffs chose to bring this lawsuit in Colorado?
That's a great question, and this is a really interesting clause. Like this Section 3 of the 14th Amendment hasn't been used really since the Civil War. And in fact, even in 1872 with the Amnesty Act, they stopped enforcing it against Confederates because the original idea was we don't want people who were trying to overthrow the government to then be able to serve as officers in the government. And so that's that's kind of the history. And so these plaintiffs, what they did was they looked across the country and they looked at different states' laws around elections, and they felt like Colorado was a good state based on our election laws to initiate this lawsuit. And that's not unusual. Plaintiffs in class action lawsuits all the time, they choose where it's forum shopping, choosing where they're going to file their lawsuit.
So help us get ready for tomorrow. What exactly can we expect during those oral arguments?
Right, so the oral arguments are going to be interesting, and we've heard all the arguments before. The Trump team is saying that, hey, this is not due process, that the Senate has to convict on an impeachment before he can be, before this can come up. So they're making those arguments. Of course, on the other side, they're saying, look, there was a trial. A judge determined that this was an insurrection. He did participate in it. And why this is difficult and interesting is because there's not a lot of definition about about what the definition of insurrection is, what engaged in means. So we're forming a body of law right now because the Constitution isn't that specific.
So interesting. So there was a court ruling on whether Trump can be criminally prosecuted. Does that decision have any impact on the Supreme Court?
Yeah, that's really important. So that's the Jack Smith case that the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals said that, yes, a former president can be criminally prosecuted. So that case is fundamentally important, but that's an appeals court. So that doesn't have any binding authority on the U.S. Supreme Court. And now he'll probably appeal that. He has until, I believe, Monday to file that appeal. So that will likely be in front of the Supreme Court, and whether they accept writ or not is a question.
Oof.
All right, a lot to break down right there. We also have a crew in D.C. that's going to be bringing you the latest updates as this case progresses there through the Supreme Court. Also, we got Whitney on hand. And in case we need any interpreting of what's happening.
I'll be back this afternoon. And one really quick, issue that came out in that appeals court was that the court said he is an officer. And so the Supreme Court could use that and say, hey, there have been other courts that said the president is an officer. So it could have some influence on the case.
We'll be watching.
Yeah.
And thank you, as always, for breaking it down for us.
Of course.